Good evening, and welcome back to the Poe Museum. Tonight I'd like to show you this early and unique daguerreotype. Do you recognize it? Well, the inscription on the back identifies its subject as Edgar Allan Poe. So could this be a long-lost portrait of the master of the macabre? We'll find out on tonight's installment of the Curator's Crypt. If you've been on eBay in the past decade or so, you've probably seen lots of early tintypes and daguerreotypes and paintings that are said to be long-lost portraits of Edgar Allan Poe, previously unknown and unpublished. Now, I'm not talking about just a portrait that somebody did yesterday. We're talking about portraits that were done back in the 1840s, during Poe's lifetime, that have fallen through the cracks of time only to be rediscovered and represented to the public. And it is kind of a big deal when long-lost daguerreotypes are rediscovered. Remember that episode of Antiques Roadshow? So when a new or previously unknown image of Edgar Allan Poe from his lifetime comes before the public, it makes national news, headlines, news coverage, and it commands high prices at auction. The problem is, most of these new images are not Poe. Now, this is nothing new. Long before Antiques Roadshow, people have been trying to rediscover those lost images of Poe. Now, to be honest, there are lost images out there. There's ones that we know of their existence, or at least we know they existed at one point. Supposedly, Poe was painted by his friend Robert Sully, as well as by Robert Sully's uncle Thomas Sully. There's a letter that mentions that there was a portrait of Poe done when he was in London between the ages of 6 and 11. Wouldn't you like to see this early Poe picture? We have no idea what it looks like, where it went, what size it was. It's probably forever lost. There's also some daguerreotypes of Poe that we only know through copy photographs, but the originals have been missing for well over a century. But then there's pictures like this. This was announced in the Anglo-Saxon Review in 1900. This was a newly discovered painting of Poe at the age of 19 by the famous American artist Henry Inman. The problem is it doesn't really look like him, and Poe is still in the military, barely scraping by as an enlisted man. So how would he have afforded to get a famous artist to paint his portrait? We've also got this one from a 1926 biography of Poe by Mary Phillips. In fact, she signed the book right there. As the frontispiece, the most important picture in her whole book, she has this, another portrait attributed to Henry Inman. Everybody thinks that Henry Inman's painting Poe's portrait for some reason. And look, he's even got a little soul patch there. And you can tell just from looking, this isn't him either. She also reproduced another image of dubious authenticity. But it didn't end there. There are lots of images that claim to be the long-lost portrait of Poe that have turned up over the years, and most of them have just shot right back down. And I still get these things today. People email me about pictures they found that they hope this will be the one to fill in that missing blank in history. And so far, we just haven't found it. But here are a few of the other ones that have come up over the years. This was printed in 1940 and was supposed to show Poe as a child. Do you see any problems with it? You should. Photography didn't exist until Poe was about 30 years old, so this obviously isn't him. Here's another one. This daguerreotype descended through the Allan family, Poe's foster father's family, and is supposed to have showed Poe with his college roommates at the University of Virginia. Same problem as before, photography didn't exist yet. And another problem, the clothing and the sort of casual pose, the setting, look a lot more like a photo taken around 1860, well after Poe's death. And to top it off, let's take a closer look at some of these people. I think the one over here is actually one of John Allan's sons, which we know from an authenticated daguerreotype of his son, William Allan. And I think the one right there in the middle is another one of Allan's sons, which makes sense because this came from John Allan's family's collection. So that's something you have to look for when you see a lot of Poe photographs. Make sure it's the right kind of photograph. Make sure it's the right pose, the right setting. In Poe's day, they would have used daguerreotypes. So you're looking for something that's going to take a little while to develop. Somebody's going to be really uncomfortable, trying to hold really still, looking right at the camera, very formal, stiff pose. But if you see a happy picture of Poe frolicking on the beach and a little snapshot, that's probably a much later period. Now, how about this famous Poe? It looks a lot like Poe, but the clothing's all wrong. It's a later period too. So how about this one? This is from the Academy of Natural Sciences in Philadelphia, taken about 1840. So Poe would have been living in Philadelphia at that time, was very interested in science, would have known people at the Academy, had already written a textbook on seashells. So some people have proposed that this guy over here is Poe. The problem is we don't have any real documentation. Maybe it looks a bit like him, but it's so small, so blurry, it's kind of hard to make a positive identification. So right now we just have to rule this as a faux Poe. And how about this one? A photograph of Edgar Allan Poe in his coffin. What could be more apropos? And during Poe's lifetime, they did make post-mortem portraits. So it's not outside the realm of possibility that Poe could have been photographed in his coffin. But this isn't the picture. It's obviously not him. Just look at the face there, the hair. We have a photograph taken of Poe in Richmond about 2 weeks before he died, and there's no way his hair grew that much in 2 weeks. But also, when you look at these faux Poes, be sure to look at the facial structure. Make sure he has the right shape of nose and chin, that the ear's the right shape. Compare it with authentic daguerreotypes of Poe to make sure that, just like in real Poe portraits, one eye is sufficiently higher than the other. Then be on the lookout for that big broad forehead. It was both broad and sloping at the same time. One of his contemporaries, who didn't like him very much, referred to it as almost snake-like. So keeping that in mind, take a look at this portrait that somebody sent me, trying to find out if this could possibly be a long-lost portrait of Poe. And it does look a lot like him. The hairstyle's similar. He does have a mustache. The only problem is it's John Wilkes Booth. Now, among those other Poe portraits that I mentioned that are still out there, they might be difficult to recognize, especially the ones done before he grew his mustache. They don't really look a lot like we expect him to look. But these are authentic life portraits of Poe. But how about this one? This is a photograph of a lost daguerreotype, but who is it? Is that Poe? It is. It's just very badly damaged. It was scratched. The face is almost completely wiped out during a failed cleaning attempt. But that is Poe, and we know it based on a later tintype copy made of it. Now, don't lose hope out there, you aspiring Poe collectors. There's probably plenty of things still out there, tucked away in a trunk, locked in some attic, things that haven't been seen for 50 or 100 years, just waiting to be rediscovered. But just remember, make sure it's the right kind of photograph. Make sure the pose, the clothing, everything look right. Make sure the guy actually looks like Poe. And another thing, if it looks too good to be true, it probably is. Remember that episode of Antiques Roadshow? Well, that daguerreotype was stolen. And after the episode aired, the FBI came a knocking at that lady's door, and they still haven't figured out exactly how the piece was stolen from its rightful owner and how it got from that person to the person on the show. But either way, once the rightful owners found out what it was worth, they auctioned it off. And now it's in another private collection. And that brings us to this picture. This is a full plate daguerreotype, so pretty big piece. Most of the daguerreotypes we see, in fact, all the daguerreotypes we see from Poe's lifetime are significantly smaller. They're maybe 6 plate or quarter plate daguerreotypes. So this is a whole big plate, probably a lot more than Poe could have afforded. And we'll notice these big white splotches everywhere on the plate. Those are probably deposits of mercury. And mercury fumes were used in developing this image on this silver-plated piece of copper. There's also lots of scratches and abrasions, making it very difficult to see whoever this is. And what we do know of the history of this is that it came from the studio of Mathew Brady, who I mentioned in a previous video was an early 19th century pioneer of American photography. And he claimed that he had photographed Poe in his New York studio in 1844. So could this be that original daguerreotype? Well, the only indication we have of who it is on the back. There's a penciled name there that says Edgar Allan Poe. Of course, they misspelled his middle name, but everybody misspells his middle name. You get used to that after a while. And then it also says down here, Handy/Wash/DC. And Levin Corbin Handy was Mathew Brady's nephew-in-law and apprentice. And he's the one who inherited all of Brady's glass plate negatives and daguerreotype plates. So maybe that explains where this came from. We just don't know who wrote on the back that this was Edgar Allan Poe. But based on what I've told you so far tonight, things to look out for. Do you think this is Poe or no? Let us know down in the comments what you think. And if you'd like to help us preserve precious Poe pieces like this dubious daguerreotype, or our authentic daguerreotype of Edgar Allan Poe downstairs, why not support the Poe Museum or become a member at poemuseum.org. And until next time, thanks for joining us, and I'll leave you with more gratuitous footage of the Poe Museum cats doing Poe Museum cat stuff.